I'm 6 feet from the edge and I'm thinking, maybe 16 ain't so far down. Continuing that butt rock from last week.
Yeah. That's such a good term, butt rock.
HooperCast! It's episode 95 and I'm thinking, maybe 95 ain't so many episodes. But it is. It's quite a lot, Dustin.
It's quite a large number, actually.
Exactly how we're going to open the show today, because I'm not doing that again.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. Streak is broken with the stage fright.
Yeah.
So, hey, guys.
And it's back.
Hey, 95 is a lot of episodes, and we're obviously, if you know how numbers work, you know we're approaching the 100th episode. So we're trying to figure out what to do for that episode. We'll try and do something at least a little bit special. But it really depends on what's going on in 5 weeks. I mean,
right.
We might just have to slap a pre-write together.
We might have to.
Yeah. Or we might have to do episode 101 first and then, push episode 100 a week.
Right.
Like we
episode
did with
100 is the lost episode.
Yeah. We'll just claim we did it and we don't know what happened. It's not there. No, it's weird. It's gone.
Strange.
So, forgive my voice today. It should sound relatively normal, but I lost on Wednesday, by the way, when we recorded the last episode. About 2 hours later, my voice started declining. It sounds completely normal on tape, but I would leave the room and I'd come back and I'd start talking, and it was noticeably different. And it just got deeper and deeper and drier and drier. And then Thursday, I woke up and I was like, and I couldn't talk.
Wow.
And I could force it, and it was weird because I would sit there and direct, and if I'm trying to talk, this is my regular vocal range that I'm talking in now, and I would try and speak just like this, and nothing would come out. So the only way I could talk unbroken was to dig down deep, and I could talk down
into a falsetto.
It would the other way. Yeah, yeah, and I'd be like sound one, and it was way, way deeper because I had just, I don't know, whatever was back there was just all that mucus or whatever was just covering my throat. Yeah, and it sounded like I sound like a different person. So it's clearing up. This is probably the most normal I've sounded in a week. Wow. So shouldn't have really spent that much time explaining that, but just.
Well, no, that's a fun anecdote.
It is a fun anecdote. I had another one, and I forgot what it was, so whatever. Never mind. Anyway, well, today, we got a few things to talk about, I guess.
Yeah.
I wanted to go first real quick, just because of the date. So on Friday, it was the 14-year anniversary of September 11th. Mm-hmm. And every year, the way... We're about to get real personal here, folks. Buckle up. Every year, the way I remember, the attacks is, as any, not as any film lover would, but I just thought, okay, well, I probably mentioned this on the show before. I probably mentioned it last year, but every year I watch United 93 on September 11th. Mm-hmm. That's like my ritual. That's really the only film ritual I have now that I think about it. There's no other film I make sure to watch annually. I always watch United 93. And it came out in 2006, about 5 years after the attacks happened. It was directed by Paul Greengrass, and it featured a cast of almost completely unknown actors. Mm-hmm. At 99%. You probably wouldn't recognize any of them, especially at the time. Sure. I can't even look back at them now and think, I recognize that dude. I don't know any of these people. And that was good because the whole point was not to have any one person on the plane outshine the other, pretty much. Except for, the passengers over the terrorists, which, is warranted.
Makes sense.
Another one of the reasons I continue to revisit it, I read about the attacks, on the day of, and I watch the movie, and every year, it's affected me more and more. Mm-hmm. we've talked before about like what films like kind of make you lose it emotionally, like make you cry. Some people, The Green Mile's it for, one for me, Warriors one. And I don't cry very often. I watched this one at work on Saturday. And at, spoiler alert, at the end when they're charging the cockpit and trying to take the plane back, I started bawling at work.
Yeah.
I'm not even at home by myself. Like at any point someone could walk in and be like, hey, what's up? And the reason I guess I should be talking more about the film and less about what it, but
no, man,
the reason is because the movie is one of those where, okay, so there are no survivors of this event. It's based on a true story, and you know how it ends. Yet when they're going for every time I watch it, when they go for the cockpit, I got this feeling like, come on, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. And and it's so heartbreaking at the end when they don't. And it's such a tense movie, and it's sort of, it brings so many things to the forefront for me, like just in terms of like the human impulse to survive, the survival instinct, the fighting spirit of, I guess in this case particularly the American people, the presence of true evil in the world on the part of the terrorists, in a slight way, the chains of regulation, in terms of not being able to scramble enough jets to actually alongside these planes or whatever. I think they cleared like 4 jets for the whole East Coast or something at the time. I was noticing little details and whatever.
Sure.
And just kind of the film takes place in real time, so you are basically reliving the day. You're watching the second plane hit the tower from an air traffic control tower, or when they show the impact, it's the news footage, but sure. It's a really powerful movie, and my heart breaks for the families every year over and over again. Whether I watch this film or not, for what happened that day. And I kind of hate hashtag never forget, but you really shouldn't forget it, because it's spelled out right in front of us, all these things, and more than anything, the idea that none of those people in that plane were going to get to see their loved ones ever again. And they're all calling their people, they're crying, and they're telling people like, here's the safe, the combination is this, my will's inside, and telling their, oh, okay, she's asleep. No, don't wake her up. Just make sure she knows I love her. Some people told people what was going on. Some people were just like, I just want to say I love you so much, and the fact that they knew, like, guys, we're going to die no matter what. And our only chance of living is if we can get this dude who has flown single-engine planes before, if we can get him to the front of the plane, take the controls back. And it's crazy just to see them rush and take the first dude down, and they realize that the bomb is fake. And the second dude starts freaking out, and they finally get to him after the one dude rolls the plane. They just crawl their way up. They get him. They break his fucking arm. They choke him out. Like it's crazy, and it's so powerful. And I'm not going to say it's the most powerful film ever made. That's a matter of perspective. But for me, every year I watch that film, and I guess I thought I'd mention it just because, like, it's had the greatest impact on me this year. I guess I didn't really realize how much that day really sticks with me, and how simultaneously angry, sad, proud, and grateful it reminds me to be.
Right.
Yep. Like, I can't imagine. And I think the biggest reason it affects me so emotionally is because would I have the courage to do the same thing that those people did? Would I stand up and be heroic like those people were? Mm. And I think part of why it gets me so much is like, you'd like to think you would, but would you really, would you really have the strength in that situation to charge down, the aisle of a plane at a guy who's holding a knife, knowing like, even if I get past this guy, I still have to get to the pilot, and then what,
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't imagine what those people went through, and,
No, me neither.
And the only reason their fate is any better than the other three planes are that the other three planes were under the impression that they were being taken back to the airport and going to be held as hostages,
Mm-hmm.
And they would get to go home. And then all of a sudden they're flying over New York, and that's probably the last thing they saw. And these people actually had a chance to, had a chance to fight for their lives.
Change, yeah.
So, shit, I didn't mean to start on such a bummer like that, everybody.
No,
so
man.
Come back. But it really gets me every year.
Yeah.
And so if you haven't seen it, watch it. I mean, now if you're a conspiracy theorist, douchebag, then, don't, because you're going to watch a whole movie full of things that you don't believe happened. That you don't believe
exactly.
are true. So if you think that we shot the plane down, or if you think that, the buildings were a controlled demolition, or that it was an inside job, from your perspective, it's going to be a movie. It's going to be a movie full of a bunch of bullshit.
Right, exactly.
But not only, even if I did think it was an inside job, I would still choose to believe this version as a comfort. But I genuinely don't think it was an inside job. I don't want to get into the conspiracy theory, because this is not political radio.
Conspiracy cast.
But conspiracy cast. But I not only do I not believe that, but I refuse to believe that, and I refuse to believe that 3,000 people, were killed so we could get to Iraq for oil.
Right.
So,
yep, I agree.
Anyway, yeah, the movie is tremendous, I think, and horrifying, and but important too. So,
yes. Yeah.
Please tell me you have an upper, Dustin.
Yeah, I've got a couple things we can talk about. So for the past little while, something that's been bugging me, I guess more and more, is the state of Christian cinema. It wasn't always as poor as it is today. And so I've sort of been like, anytime a Christian movie kind of comes across my screen on Netflix, I'm like, well, let me give it a shot and see what I can do. Whether it's made by Christians or whether it's just like Christian in theme or whatever, let me check it out and just see. So this led me to Nicolas Cage's Left Behind not too long ago. I guess about a week ago. And man,
this is not about his left butt cheek, is it?
It is not, okay. But that would be far better.
Oh no!
Oh, my butt cheek!
Oh, my butt!
Oh, my butt cheek! Oh, it's got a mole
right behind.
So look, I mean, I'm not going to review the movie because I got about 45 minutes into it, which was about when the inciting incident happened. So just pacing wise, like I spent 45 minutes watching people that were not reacting to the movie yet. So just in terms of story structure, failure.
Nicolas Cage is not the most watchable people for 45 minutes without an inciting incident either.
He's really not. But the weird thing is, despite his prominent place on the box art, it seemed like he wasn't the main character. He was not the protagonist. It seemed to me the protagonist was this female character, his daughter in the film. And from what I could tell, she was thoroughly unlikable and unsympathetic and shallow, and I didn't like her character at all. So that's a problem. And then maybe Nicolas Cage is secondary, and then the third kind of character, who was in the original film played by Kirk Cameron, and he was the main character, is played by Chad Michael Murray this time around, who you guys may know from any number of like teen dramas, and that's about it. So to be fair, like he was also not likable, and they spent a long time trying to tell us how like he was a journalist and was a big deal, but they never showed us anything that made him a big deal. So anyway, the point is, Yeah, I got about 45 minutes into that thing, and that's when the inciting incident happened, and it was just like, man, I just can't. And so, yeah, I quit that, but kept on going, kept on searching. And I came across two movies that I want to talk about today. One is a documentary called Four Blood Moons, and the other is a narrative called The Gospel of John. And I know there are those of you who are probably like tuning out right now because of Christian sentiment or whatever. But this, I think this is interesting because I think it's going to bring up a couple of topics, and we're not going to spend the whole time talking about the merits of the story or of whatever. But we're going to talk about just the art form. So I've got a question for you, Hooper, that I want to pose to you and get your feedback on, specifically when it comes to documentaries. Mm-hmm. So we'll start with Four Blood Moons. Because I feel like you're more of a documentary guy than I am, and so I feel like you'll have a better insight into the style of documentary or whatever, even if you've never seen this, which I assume you have not seen Four Blood Moons.
No.
Okay, so are you familiar with the Four Blood Moons idea?
No, it sounds super badass though.
I know, right? Okay, so this is a theory that takes into account all manner of astronomy and religious history. So the idea is that throughout history, there have only been, I believe, 4, maybe 3, I can't remember now. There's been a handful of times when in a given, I guess, calendar year, the moon has turned to blood 4 times. They call this a tetrad. And so the moon just appears red in the sky. And this has only happened 4 times, or however many times. And for some reason, 4 is coming out to my mind. Anyway, but every time it has happened, it has coincided with big, big events for the Jewish people. And so using both text from the Talmud and from the Christian Bible, they're speculating that what God is doing is sending signs to man through the sun and the moon and stars, and we can study that astronomically and find the patterns behind it now, and we can see that there is a given pattern, and every time that it happens, something has happened. So for instance, the last time I believe that this has happened, Israel was reinstated. It was a state finally, and people returned to Israel, and so this was a huge moment for the Jewish people, and it was a blood moon. A 4 blood moon, time. And then before that, like the Holocaust. Before that, it has to do with the expulsion of Jews from Spain. And so there's a lot of Jewish history wrapped up in this, and the idea that the Jews being God's chosen people, God is communicating something large through the stars to the Jewish people and to the world at large. And this, we're about to hit, I believe this month, maybe next month, the first of 4 blood moons. So they're expecting something huge for the Israelites in the next year, which, of course, with the U.S. now talking more to Iran with nuclear weapons and whatnot, and siding more with the enemies of Israel than ever before, certainly is curious. That's happening on this at this time. So anyway, the idea is that that the moon and the stars are telling us and foretelling for us that something has happened and will happen again with the Jews. So it's a very interesting topic. So this documentary is broken up into 3 sections. You've got your interview sections, where we're talking to religious leaders from both Christian and Jewish circles, and getting our basic information. Obviously, by the fact that I'm not 100% sure how many times it's happened, they don't do a very good job of it. They're explaining the concept. They kind of gloss over some things. So there's that. But then the second section is like a narrative section, which it seemed, I guess they could be true stories, but I don't think they ever said that they were. But so they'll have a person and his family, and they're Jewish, and they're getting on Christopher Columbus's boat, so it's very like a period. It's almost like a short film, but it's like, less than 10 minutes long. And it just tells the story of these Jews being forced out of Spain and going with Christopher Columbus. So anyway, there are narrative sections. And then on top of all of that, sort of bridging the gap between those, you've got archive footage, should the time period be appropriate for that. Obviously, there's no cameras around with Christopher Columbus, but you know what I mean, like Holocaust stuff. With contemporary music, sort of like a music video. So you got those three sections. My question to you is how, when you're watching a documentary. For me, I found myself super bored because I don't like it if you mix narrative works into my documentary. I don't like reenactments usually. I don't like, this like, let's take a break to show you what, may have been in a short film style. What do you think about the use of sort of narrative short film within a larger documentary? Have you ever seen that done well?
I don't recall I've ever seen it done, period. I'm wondering if I have, and nothing's coming straight up to mind.
Sort of, to me, one of the big things is like, if you watch like, court TV or whatever, they'll always have like the reenactment where the guy's like, hey, come with me, to the girl. And then they go out and he kills her and it's all black and white and like Dutch angles and whatnot. And it's really goofy. So that, I guess maybe that's what comes to mind for me. So that ruins it whenever I see it in a documentary. But I'll just say in this particular instance, it really stuck out as like annoying because I'm here to learn something. You know what I'm saying?
It's a mixture. What the biggest thing about it seems like the auditory interruption. So you're listening to a person talking about something, and you're like, okay, this is the voice I'm listening to, and these are the visuals I'm seeing, and I'm following you. And then it's like all of a sudden you hit a wall. That person stops talking, and then we're watching like a short film.
Basically, yes.
If you want to do this, the middle ground is probably what they do in Criminal Minds, which is whenever they do a reenactment there, like it's always shot really like, not quite like as the scene would be, but if they're like talking about a crime or like, they're doing this mental exercise where it's like, can you remember what the person was wearing? Like they've got the two people talking in the FBI room, and then all of a sudden they're in the kitchen during the crime, or they're hidden in the closet with her while she's watching her parents get murdered. And it's like, do you remember what the guy was wearing? And it's like you're revisiting the scene, but the dialogue is whoever's already talking continuing to talk, or if you were just to have a voiceover narration of a reenacted thing, but not narrative. Narratives are for narratives,
Yeah, no, I agree.
That does sound distracting.
It is. It was very distracting. And then, of course, the music videos, too, kind of took away from everything as well because, there was really no point for them at all. They also had a narrator who, would, like, guide you into the next sort of idea or whatever. And so, I guess... But I would consider that a part of like the interviews. So really, it just seemed like there was so much going on. But like I said, at the expense, I feel like, of knowledge. So what really was an interesting topic, I feel like you're better served like just looking at the Wikipedia page because you can read what happened when and get sort of all of the information all at once without being interrupted by shenanigans. Like, does that make sense? So, like, I don't know if... I've always thought, okay, so a documentary to me does one of two things. One, it teaches me something that I don't know in a visual way. Yeah. Or it tells me a story about a person. And in a way, that's telling you something you don't know. But it can be used more... as entertainment rather than as teaching as well. So for instance, you're talking about like I Am Chris Farley or whatever the case may be.
Historical or educational.
Yeah.
Or biographical.
Right. And then of course you've got like your documentaries that don't don't have interviews. It's just sort of like fly on the wall, let's watch things happen. So something like the Beatles' Let It Be is just there's cameras as the Beatles are recording this album. So there's, different forms of documentary. And for me, I couldn't put my finger on what this was. And I found that really distracting. And if we're honest, like about halfway through, I started fast forwarding through the narrative stuff just to get to more information because I was hooked on, okay, give me the next idea. And, it was very, very strange. So yeah, so this is the weird thing for me. Like, if you say, well, do you recommend Four Blood Moons? Well, I recommend that you study it because I think it's super interesting. But I don't know that I recommend the documentary. And I know it was a book first, so maybe the book is more, concise. Maybe the book is the same way and it cuts away to stuff. I don't know. Like here's, an archived, letter from, somebody who was fleeing from Germany, or whatever it was. So maybe the book is that way. I don't know. But I know it was very distracting for the movie. And so what I would say is if you're interested in astronomy or in history, especially Jewish history or like the history of just like nations and whatnot, I think it's a very interesting thing to study and I'd love to study it more, but this just kind of whet my appetite. It didn't really give me a lot of information that I needed. So for that reason, I can't really recommend the documentary, but I would recommend the topic. So it was a really strange, feeling having finished the documentary and feeling like I still don't really know much. And I'm just kind of like, it was almost like a teaser trailer for Wikipedia research, which I will inevitably do.
Right.
But man, it was strange. But I was thinking about Kellen, who loves astronomy so much. I mean, I feel like this kind of stuff would interest him. And then my brother is a history major, so I feel like it would interest him. But this documentary doesn't do enough to like placate either one of those people or their appetites. So so yeah, it was a strange ride, but an interesting topic. And they make a lot of good points. I don't want to make it sound too astronomical because it's not. It has a lot of history in it too. So we're talking about stuff like the way that the world has always treated Israel is really different from the way the world has treated any other nation. There's never been a nation that's been as hunted and as persecuted and as just kind of like targeted as Israel has been, and the fact that the way that they sort of show like the brotherhood between America and Israel throughout the years is very interesting in that we have a lot of the same philosophies of democracy and whatnot. And so now, like when it gets towards the end of the documentary, which I think came out just last year, so so it feels pretty recent because they're talking about ISIS and all this kind of stuff. It's interesting that and when the documentary was made, they were just sort of talking and sort of speculating that America might partner with Iran before they would partner with Israel, which we're starting to kind of see that as an inevitability now. Israel has always, to me, seemed way more like on our wavelength. And they were talking, even in this documentary, a little bit about the way that Israel has always sided with America, perhaps more than any other nation except for Great Britain. Israel has always had our back. And so if we move toward a different country and in essence a country that is antagonizing Israel, then really, I mean, we're just like going against these people who have always had our back. And it's a really strange thing that would happen in a year with Four Blood Moons. So, so it's a really interesting topic, and I don't think the documentary does it justice. But if you are interested in the documentary, I would definitely say like check it out, but fast forward through those narrative sections because they don't serve the information very well. I guess they give some context if you're interested to like, well, I wonder what it would be like for a person at that time. Maybe it gives a little bit of context, but really, I mean, not a lot. So, and it's nothing that you can't like dream up in your head. So, yeah, just, you know, like I said, it's a very interesting topic, and I know this isn't the political cast, but one of the things that they talked about was in the Bible, there's a promise to Abraham that God makes, and he says, I will bless the nations that bless you, and I will curse the nations that curse you. And, of course, you being, you know, the descendants of Abraham. And one of the guys in the documentary goes through and says, we can look at that historically and see that every regime that has ever threatened the Jews is gone. So for me, I know, like I said, this isn't a political podcast, but the point is, to me, I don't really see a point in us siding with anybody other than Israel. So, yeah. And that's sort of I guess the point of Four Blood Moons is that let's be aware that there's one coming up, and we can watch our brothers and we can make sure that they're okay, because it's a whole lot better for the Four Blood Moons to be like, hey, you got statehood again, than to be, hey, here's another awful, terrible time for you. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's, yeah. So that's Four Blood Moons. I mean,
that's a really interesting topic.
It really is. And you know, I'm not an expert astronomist or anything, so I don't know.
If you were, you'd know it's astronomer.
Is it? Oh, okay. Yeah. See, I'm not an expert at anything. I'm not even an expert Englisher. So that's Four Blood Moons. It is an interesting topic, and yeah, if you're interested in the documentary, again, just kind of fast forward through some of it. But the next is the Gospel of John. This is actually because this is a strange one here. So the Gospel of John came out in 2014. It's about 3 hours long, and it's directed by a guy named David Batty. Yeah, there's not much to say about David Batty. He hasn't done a whole lot. He did some TV series episodes, directed a couple of short films, and then the Gospel of John seems to be sort of like his first big thing. And he's got 3 more movies coming out called the Gospel of Matthew, the Gospel of Mark, and the Gospel of Luke. So this is a strange movie, and here's what I mean by that. And I'll go ahead and start it with, I highly recommend it. The Gospel of John is essentially an audiobook. They have a narrator who reads the entire Gospel of John, and there's actually, if you look this up on Netflix, there's 3 versions. There's a Spanish language version. There's and then there's 2 English versions. One in which the narrator reads the King James version of the Bible, and another one where he reads the New International Version of the Bible. So depending on your personal preferences and whatnot, you can pick either one of those. But basically, it's sort of an audiobook in that he just reads straight through it. And there are scenes behind it which are super interesting, and I can't think of another movie that has been done this way. So the scenes behind it are, of course, actors performing vaguely what's being talked about. So you won't see, in other words, like Jesus saying things because the narrator is saying them. But under the narrator, you can hear the dialogue being said, but the dialogue that's being spoken by the actors is Greek and Aramaic, just like the original text, and the actors are all ethnically correct. You're not going to get like a white guy playing Jesus again. So it's very ethnically correct. They shot it from what I read. It looked like they actually shot it in the Holy Land. Yeah, I mean, so this is a very interesting movie, if only because it's ethnically correct, but also because the actors are speaking the original languages, which is cool, but they did that in the Passion of the Christ. It's the entire gospel spoken. So it's one of those things where you could kind of like do something else and just kind of listen to the whole thing. But when you watch it, it's really cool because, like I said, it's not like a literal, and then Jesus broke the bread, and you'll see him break the bread at that time. It's almost like music video or like montage-y style. So you kind of just get a feeling or like an atmosphere of what's going on. So let's say there's, like the Sermon on the Mount. So Jesus is speaking and you get a lot of shots of stuff, but it's not necessarily linear, if that makes sense. So it may cut back to something that happened at a different time that mirrors this particular story, or whatever the case is. It's really montage-y in that way. And I'm not going to be able to describe it as accurately as I wish I could, but I think it's super interesting in its filmmaking style, and it's kind of experimental because the actors are performing this, but we don't really get, especially because it's in another language and because it's sort of muted underneath the narrator, we don't really get the full extent of what the actors are portraying, but rather we get to watch them like physically bring to life what the narrator is speaking. And what the narrator is speaking is the text as it's written in the Gospel of John. And to me, this is the most accurate and the most interesting version of the life of Jesus that has ever been put to film. Maybe because it's word for word, just read from the Bible. Maybe it's because its filmmaking is so interesting and in some cases very, very beautiful. And maybe it's because it's so different because, like I said, it's correct in its casting. So I don't know what it is about this particular version, but it's very, very interesting, and I highly recommend it. Like I said, there's 3 versions on Netflix, so you may have to. They don't seem to be labeled except for the Spanish language version. When I put this on my queue, there wasn't a specific like tag for this is the new international version or this is the King James version. There may be now, I'm not sure, but I didn't pay attention to it last night. But anyway, the point is, it's a super interesting adaptation of the life of Christ because it's very different from everything you've seen. I mean, you've seen all the scenes where Jesus like sits with the disciples and says, I say this because of whatever. And it's like, sort of what was written, but not, but it's like adapted so that it fits better into a conversation or whatever. Mm-hmm. Or, we got to give, I don't know, whoever, like we got to give Peter something to say here. Well, this is just exactly what it is. And there are times where like Jesus will be like laughing and talking with the disciples, and what's being read isn't Jesus laughed and talked with the disciples, but it's like, just something happy. You know what I mean? So it's not a super literal reenactment of what's being spoken, if that makes sense. So anyway, it's very, very interesting. And if nothing else, it makes for great, like, something great to watch, for like 20 minutes at a time or something. And just to have something on when you're working or whatever the case is, because it's beautiful stuff. And the obviously, I mean, the Bible is a beautiful piece of text. So what you're hearing and what you're seeing mesh together in something really beautiful. And, I just think it's really, really interesting. And, yeah. So I highly recommend this. And, yeah. So
where'd you watch that again?
It's on Netflix.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So, everything, like I said, just kind of comes together and is, I don't know, better presented than 90% of all the other Jesus movies out there. So yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. And there's quite a few times where when you watch it, at least for me, like you were talking about United 93, there's a few times watching this that it'll get you choked up because I mean, to see it and to see it, at least for me, you know, I don't know if it's just the setting and the people, but it just feels more authentic, and to feel like I'm seeing it is, I don't know, it not only does it help it stick in my brain better, you know, the words of Christ or what happened and when it happened, but it helps me, I don't know, imagine what it might have been like, and that's really moving for me at several different times in the film. So,
well, man, that sounds like something to check out.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. I mean, if for nothing else, like, I understand there's going to be people who are listening to this who are not a Christian and are like, I've seen the story of Jesus 800 times, I don't need to see it again. And I gotcha. Like, I hear you. There's been a lot of movies made about Jesus. Question, more about Jesus than any other person in history? I don't know. It's a good question. But this is different. And if you're interested in filmmaking, this is a very cool piece of it. And it's something that I can't really say, oh, it reminded me of, because it's kind of unique in its approach. So, yeah, I enjoyed it a lot.
That's good. It's hard to execute that kind of thing.
It really is. And like I said, it may just be because, like, when you grow up like I did with the Bible and you hear these stories and you hear people say them, you kind of get it stuck in your head, like, oh, you know, and especially like, okay, there's a movie called The Greatest Story Ever Told, and I can't really get behind that movie because Max von Sydow plays Jesus in that, and the problem is he's a little too, like, blunt with people, and his love doesn't come across. And so for me, like, that was a hindrance to, like, actually getting behind that version of the film or of the story. But with this, maybe it's because he's muted underneath the narrator, but all of those little, like, presuppositions, like, oh, well, he didn't say that line the way that I've always read it in my head. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, if Jesus says, you know, get behind me, Satan, you know, the way in my head that I've always read that is like, da, da, da. So if he says it, like, in sadness, then I'm like, oh, that's a missed opportunity, or that's weird. Yeah. But in this, like, all they're doing is just reading the Bible, and so it's, you know, those little tiny things that you'll bring into the film from yourself kind of can disappear, and I like that. So
let's switch gears pretty abruptly and talk about what's in theaters this weekend or / right now. I'll switch gears definitely and say that Black Mass is in theaters now, and this has been a movie that I've sort of kept my eye on all year because I've spoken in past episodes about how I'm excited for Johnny Depp to play someone who's not like a wizard or a whimsical whodaddy whatnot man, and just to not be in a Tim Burton film or Jack Sparrow. So, and I recently watched, and I'll hold this review for another time, but I recently watched a documentary on Netflix about Whitey Bulger, and who's the guy that he's playing in this film. Notorious gangster, bad man, maybe not an FBI informant, kind of disputed, and I'll tell you why later on. But the whole plot of this film is supposed to be, depicting that time starting in the 70s in South Boston where Whitey Bulger was like, kind of covering some territory, and the FBI approached him about being an informant, and he allegedly said he would, but he started just turning in people like rivals and competition. Like he gave them disinformation sometimes, or he'd give him real information on competitors of his so he could grow as a gangster, and all the time kept killing people and running his criminal operations. So I'm not sure how I presumably the film's probably going to end with his trial or whatever in 2013. Who knows? But director's name is Scott Cooper. It's got a pretty good cast. Johnny Depp is in the lead, and if you've seen that trailer, he's looking good. Like he's looking scary and everything that I know he's capable of as an actor. And I don't think I've quite ever seen him play a villain, really, or a character like this morally corrupt. and that's exciting for me. I enjoy watching. I enjoy watching that. Benedict Cumberbatch is in here playing his brother, who was like a state senator, which is an interesting dynamic. Jesse Plemons, our Friday Night Lights friend, playing one of his henchmen. Joel Edgerton playing FBI agent John Connolly, who's his handler with the FBI. Sienna Miller, Dakota Johnson, Rory Cochrane, Julianne Nicholson. You got a good cast, an interesting person, or an interesting main character, and an interesting period just in America, the 70s and 80s and beyond, and just the genre of crime, all that just sort of spells a movie I'll see, whether I see it in theaters or not. Currently, I mean, as you're listening to this, I'm out of town, so I don't think I'll be able to see this opening weekend. But I'm gonna make an effort to, one way or the other, see this movie, because I'm deeply interested, if nothing else, in just seeing Depp's performance. As frustrated as I am with his choices lately, I'm infinitely interested in him as an actor, and I'm hoping for a little bit of a resurrection here of what I like about him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
I'm also peeking at, if this is your thing, there's the Maze Runner, the sequel, the Scorch Trials, is in theaters.
I've still not seen any of those.
John said the Maze Runner was good.
Yeah, that's what he said.
I mean, this is another young adult, post-apocalyptic, teen survival kind of movie. All these novels that were probably around, always around around the, like Twilight and Hunger Games and whatnot, but now they're all getting movies because they're popular with, teens. So they're all getting greenlit. It's just too bad because they're just starting to bleed together. So whatever, but apparently the first one wasn't terrible. So perhaps see this one. And the only other thing I see that I'm even really paying attention to is Everest, which is clearly about the climbers and whatnot. But you got a good cast: Keira Knightley, Jake Gyllenhaal, Robin Wright, Josh Brolin, Sam Worthington, and Jason Clarke.
And if you've seen the trailer, you know that Keira Knightley had the easiest job in the world. She just had to sit on a couch and talk on a phone. Yeah. Everybody else is out there like braving the cold, and
everyone else is out there with like a beard in snow, with in a wind machine.
Yeah, exactly. And she's in a warm studio. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Everest, looks pretty cool. I think I saw one trailer for it, like on TV or something. But it seems really interesting. John Hawkes, by the way, also. So. That seems like it could be good, or it could be terrible. It really depends. That could go either way.
Speaking of terrible, there is another movie that's coming out. I don't know if it's limited or not, but it's called Cooties. And oh my gosh, I have not seen the trailer for this, but just basically it's about a group of teachers. Evidently a virus hits an elementary school and the kids become zombies. And so it's all the teachers having to band together. And listen to this cast. So the lead is Elijah Wood. You got Rainn Wilson, Allison Pill, Jack McBrayer, and Jorge Garcia. What? Why? First of all, why is Jorge Garcia in a movie? Second of all, what?
Tune into us next week. We're going to have some more stuff to talk about. Isn't Fear the Walking Dead done? Will it be done by then, or is that the week after? It's probably the week after.
Maybe the week after. I'm not sure. I haven't watched anything beyond the pilot.
Yeah, I got some catching up to do myself.
I just have to catch up, yeah.
Yeah. We'll have that for you guys whenever that's done. Real quick note about where to find us and everything. As far as the normal places go, iTunes, HooperCast, HooperCastPod.podbean.com, Blogspot, Tumblr, Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff. We are on iTunes as long as I can afford to put us on iTunes. I have a small little tucked away thing, like a birthday check, basically, that is keeping us on iTunes for you guys right now. I would like people to know that without donating, eventually we will not be on iTunes anymore. I will not pour, money that could be going to feed my daughter, to y'all's listening pleasure. But know at least that whenever I do have, that kind of little bit of money set aside, I will put us on iTunes. So if you ever cannot find us on iTunes, or you're wondering why the episodes haven't updated, or this or that, it's probably because we ran out of money and suspended the Podbean account. I will unsuspend it when it is able to be unsuspended. But in the meantime, if you ever are wondering where your episodes are or why you haven't been getting more of them, it's probably either because we didn't record one, although we've been really good about recording them every week for months now. Always check YouTube, because if they're not on iTunes, check YouTube. I'm terrible at updating YouTube right now, but I guarantee you if that was the only channel I had to put the episodes, they'd be there. So
right.
The content will always be there. The platform might change based on my abilities, or yours, if you want to get your wallets out.
Yeah.
But just know that the content's going to be there. But if you like it on your mobile device as much as I like my podcasts on my mobile device, it does cost money, and the money doesn't grow on trees. So just letting you know that. A friendly reminder. Anyway, that's it this week. Have a good weekend, everybody. We'll see you next week for the HooperCast 96. Creeping up to 100.
Oh, yeah. Almost there.
Yeah.
100.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Stupid people wearing expensive clothes.
You all, everybody.
You all, everybody. You all, everybody. But
back in the day, I almost bought Charlie's drive shaft ring. Back when it was available.
That'd be cool. I have Aragorn's ring from Lord of the Rings, but I lent it to my friend Greg. Didn't give it back. I need to call that guy.
You should.
All right. Well, goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Are you still rolling? Okay.
Yeah, I'm rolling.